as the main pledging event of the year. The conference mobilizes financial support for Syrians in Syria and for refugees and hosting communities in the region. And I am happy to announce that this year the European Commission is pledging over 3 billion euros. This builds on the pledge made at last year's conference of 560 million for this year and adding an extra 1 billion to it. And we are pledging the same total amount, 1.56 billion, for 2023. Together with the additional bilateral pledges from the EU member states, this is the European Union contribution and the total pledge generated from all the participants at the conference will be announced in the closing session. I hope that we will be able at least to match the pledges made last year, because the need has not been decreasing since last year. This funding will cover the needs of the refugees within and outside Syria and supporting the neighbor regions that so generously hosted them over more than a decade now. For more than 10 years, the neighbor countries have been hosting these refugees. And it will also support early recovery and resilience, helping Syrians to rebuild their life. Allow me to say that this does not mean that we would be funding reconstruction. We won't do that until a genuine and comprehensive political transition in Syria will be underway. The participants on the conference has reaffirmed their continued commitment of the international community to an overall and comprehensive political solution to the conflict in Syria, in line with the United Nations Security Council resolution. And we support the efforts of the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Mr. Pedersen, to generate momentum for the political process through the step-by-step process that he has been putting in place. Participants also have been recalling that now it's not time to normalize relations with the Syrian regime. It's not time to normalize relations with the Syrian regime, for which you would have to fundamentally change course and engage meaningfully in a genuine political process, which is, by the time being, not the case. Normalization as such will not bring any concessions for the regime. On the contrary, it is likely to comfort the regime in its situation that their behavior is not accepted. In the interest of the Syrian people, pressure must be maintained on the Syrian regime to engage in the United Nations sponsored political process. Participants in the conference also recognized the legitimate aspiration of the Syrian people for justice and accountability for the terrible crimes that have been committed against them in the course of the conflict. You know that today's meeting was preceded, as always, by the Day of Dialogue to make sure that Syrians has a voice, and this voice are being listened. The Day of Dialogue allows for the broader participation of civil society actors from Syria and the region. Participants exchange views, ideas, and projects for the future of Syria. It is obvious that Syrians want to create the conditions for a durable peace in Syria themselves. They should be the actors of the building of a new Syria. They want the chance to live their lives independently of and despite the Assad regime. They want to regain control of their future, no longer depending on emergency handouts. It's very much understandable, but by the time being, we have to continue supporting them. And I want to make a call for the international community to think meaningfully about how to help the Syrians themselves to build peace and ensure the development of their country. To conclude, I can say after this meeting this morning that the entire international community remains convinced that a comprehensive political solution brokered through the United Nations is the ultimate imperative. And I can say on behalf of the European Union that until the process is being fulfilled, the Syrian people will not be forgotten by us, whatever other events require our attention.
Thank you very much. So now we take the questions. In the room we have the microphone, and if you want to ask a question online, then just raise your hand in the Zoom facility. First question in the room I've seen. Go ahead, yes. Yes, use the mic, please, yes.
It works like it's on. Hi, thank you. Vince Chadwick from DevEx. My question is to ask you, High Representative, what's your response to the criticism that by not inviting Russia and by having the summit in the absence of Russia, what you've effectively done is made it more difficult to cooperate on very practical humanitarian issues in the next few months?
Yes, certainly. Russia has not been invited. And Russia has not been invited because we are inviting those partners who have a genuine, a real interest to contribute to peace in the world. And Russia, with its aggression to Ukraine, has shown that clearly that it has not such interest to maintain peace in the world. And the European Union, along with many other partners, will continue sending a clear message of rejection of the Russian military aggression against Ukraine in all international fora. This has not been a problem, although the United Nations has chosen not to co-host this last conference in light of our decision not to invite Russia, but the United Nations has actively participated and being represented at a very high level, like example, United Nations ICR Chief Filippo Grandi and Special Envoy Pedersen. So the work of the conference has not been made more difficult, and the relations with the United Nations has been positive in spite of this non-invitation to Russia.
Thank you very much. Next one, Irini, please.
Thank you, Peter. High Representative, I'd like to ask you, you've just mentioned that we should not expect any normalization of EU ties with Bashar al-Assad at the moment. Under what kind of circumstances should we expect a normalization of the ties? And secondly, on Russia, despite the robust packages of sanctions, Moscow continues the onslaught and keeps trying to divide the European Union. How EU is going to respond to Moscow? Thank you.
We continue discussing at the level of the permanent representative of the member states in order to get an agreement that could be adopted by the Foreign Affairs Council, which is the body that has a decision capacity on sanctions. We continue working on that. There are still some difficulties pending. I hope that before next meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council, which is going to take place next Sunday, these difficulties will be raised, and otherwise we will have to raise the level of discussion at the level of ministers at the Foreign Affairs Council. And I explained that no normalization without changing on the behavior of the Assad regime. Clearly, we are not going to fund the reconstruction. We are not going to normalize our relations with the Assad regime as far as there is not a deep change on their attitude towards the Syrian people, and they don't allow and they don't participate in good faith in a political transformation of the country.
And on Russia, that was a question.
Yes, and there is something not related exactly with Syria regime, but with the Syria pledging conference as the discussion on the sanctions. There is something new that you mentioned, and I want to use this opportunity to explain that today, apart from the discussion on sanctions against Russia, it's a different issue, we have agreed, the member states has agreed, and I've been issued a collective statement condemning a cyber attack that have been taking place since the beginning of the year against the Ukrainian government. And the important thing is that for the first time at the European Union level, we are attributing this attack to an state actor, to the Russian Federation. In the past, we have been saying that there were attacks coming from Russia. But one thing is to come from the Russian territory, and another thing is clearly attributed to the Russian Federation government. 1 hour before Russia launched its aggression against Ukraine on the 24th of February, the Russian Federation carried a cyber attack against the Kiev satellite. This caused significant communication outage and disruptions across several public authorities, enterprises and users in Ukraine, and affecting also some of our member states and international partners. Certainly, this cyber attack facilitated the Russian military aggression. And this cyber attack proves the multiple layers of aggression and hybrid warfare that Russia is leading against Ukraine. Disinformation is one part of these multiple layer attacks. And now, once we have attributed to the Russian Federation government, I want to stress this, then we will have to work together with Ukraine, our international partners, on how to prevent, discourage, deter, and respond to these cyber attacks that we certainly attribute to the Russian Federation.
Thank you. Next question was over there.
Richard Colborne from BBC. You say no normalisation, no reconstruction funding for Damascus. But do you see any discussion at all about more engagement with the government in Damascus from European governments or from the institutions? We've obviously seen in the last year new engagement with Damascus from some governments in the Middle East. Is there any discussion about whether there's a danger that Europe misses a moment to engage directly, to sort of push leverage? Thank you.
We take this attitude because we believe is the right one, both from a political approach and from getting the best of our resources and preventing the resources coming to support the Assad regime. If you go and spend money reconstructing Syria, it's going to support the Syrian regime. We want to support the Syrian people. But we need to have the guarantees that we can do that in order to support not just their well-being, but their freedom. What is at stake is the political development of the future of Syria. And I think that we are doing the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Let's take one last question before HREP heads back to the delegates.
Značajno Rudo Media Network. High Representative, you mentioned that without Russia, this conference can be good. But if you look at the political situation in Syria, without Russia as a permanent member of Security Council, there will be any solution? Do you believe that you will get access for the humanitarian aid and political solution without Russia here in Brussels, and to have a direct dialogue on Syria with Russia? Thank you.
Certainly, there is only one pass from the Turkish territory to the Syrian territory in the Idlib area to bring support to the more than 1 million people caught there. This support continues flowing because there is still one pass open. To keep this pass open will depend on a resolution of the Security Council, and certainly Russia could obstruct it using its veto capacity. But I strongly believe that Russia will not do it, because it would put more than 1 million people in a very dire situation. So I think that Russia will not do it. They should not do it.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and see you later. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.